My name is Allison Hayes, and at 28 years old, I never imagined I'd be standing alone at my father's funeral, surrounded by a sea of familiar faces that felt anything but warm. The church was packed with distant relatives, old colleagues, and family friends, their conversations murmuring low and indistinct as if carried by a cold breeze. But I felt none of their presence. Instead, I was drowning in a silence that clung to me like fog. It wasn't the quiet of grief, it was the kind of quiet that isolates, that marks someone as other. As I walked slowly through the front entrance, every step echoing louder than it should have, the whispers began. They didn't stop. My heels tapped against the marble floor as I passed pew after pew of people I once knew, people who now barely met my eyes or offered tight-lipped nods. I knew what they were thinking. I hadn't been back in years. I was the daughter who disappeared, the one who left to chase a dream in New York City, abandoning the family and the business that had given her everything. In their eyes, I wasn't mourning. I was intruding. Patricia, my aunt, approached me with the kind of stiff grace reserved for obligatory interactions. Her hug barely lasted a second before she stepped back, already glancing over my shoulder as if looking for someone more deserving of her condolences. "It's been a long time," she said, her smile polite but vacant. "Yes," I replied, forcing a smile of my own. "Too long." She nodded absently and quickly moved on to speak with other guests, her dismissal cutting deeper than any harsh word could have. I made my way to the small table at the side where coffee and pastries had been set out, more for form than function. I needed something to do, anything to keep my hands busy and my mind occupied. As I poured a cup of coffee, trying to will my fingers not to shake, I felt a presence at my side, Jason, my older brother. He stood with two of our cousins flanking him like bodyguards, their expressions unreadable. "Enjoying yourself?" he asked, his voice low but sharp, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. It must be nice to show up after years of absence and be treated like family. I turned slowly, setting my coffee down to keep it from spilling. "Jason, this isn't the time or the place," I said evenly, trying to keep the tremble out of my voice. "We're here to honor Dad." The words barely left my mouth before he laughed, a dry, bitter sound that pierced the air like glass. "Is that why you're here? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you're just here for the money. Dad's going to cut you off, you know." The words hit harder than they should have, not because I feared they were true, but because of the cruelty with which he said them. Several heads turned. I felt their eyes on me, hungry for drama, for validation of whatever ugly stories they'd been told about me. I took a breath. "You have no idea why I'm here," I said quietly. "Don't I?" Jason sneered. "You haven't cared about this family for years. You didn't care when Dad needed heart medication. You didn't care when he was working himself to death to maintain the company that would have secured your future too. You only care now because there might be something in it for you." More heads turned now. Someone chuckled. I wasn't sure who, but the sound cut through me like a blade. I opened my mouth to respond, but before I could speak, Uncle Warren stepped in. He placed a heavy hand on Jason's shoulder and said, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear, "Perhaps Allison should just leave. She's not really family anymore, is she?" A few nearby guests chuckled, their laughter echoing through the room like a sentence passed. For a moment I considered it, walking out, letting them have their funeral, their company, their whispers. But something inside me hardened. I thought of my father, of the man who had once taken me on long walks by the river, who had taught me how to skip stones and who used to tuck me in with stories about entrepreneurs and dreamers. That meant my father was worth staying for. "I'm staying," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Whether you like it or not, he was my father too. Jason gave a theatrical shrug, his smile smug. "Suit yourself, but don't get your hopes up for tomorrow." Dad knew who really cared about him in the end. Tomorrow, the will reading. I hadn't even been thinking about the inheritance. Not truly, but clearly everyone else had. In their eyes, I had come home only to claim what didn't belong to me. I felt the weight of their judgment pressing down like a stone on my chest. As I turned to walk away, Jason's voice followed me like a shadow. "She'd be singing a different cocoon tomorrow when she realizes Dad saw through her act years ago. I kept walking, I had to, but inside I was crumbling. I found Megan, my best friend and travel companion, near the windows. She had attended with me for support, and her face softened when she saw me. "This is worse than I expected," I whispered. "They all hate me." "They don't know you," she said, wrapping an arm around my waist. "They only know the version Jason's been feeding them. And they believe it because it's easier than questioning it. But you're not here for them. You're here for your dad. Just get through today. Then the will reading. Then we go back to New York." I nodded, though my stomach was tight with dread. If the funeral was this brutal, how much worse would tomorrow be? The reception dragged on like a slow, excruciating dream. People I had known since childhood either avoided me entirely or offered. Interactions so fake, I almost wished they hadn't bothered. My father's longtime business partner, Kenneth Sullivan, spoke to me with a clipped politeness that bordered on cold. "Your father was a remarkable man," he said, his eyes flicking over my shoulder, never quite meeting mine.
"He built quite a legacy. With Jason." "Right," I said softly.
"The company is in good hands now," he added, finally looking at me with a faint, unreadable expression. "Your brother has your father's vision. The transition should be seamless." I understood the message. I wasn't part of the plan. I never had been. I spotted my cousin Diane across the room, talking animatedly with a group of relatives near the refreshment table. I remembered playing dolls with her under the dining room table when we were 5. When she saw me approaching, her expression froze. She whispered something to the group before stepping away to greet me. "Allison," she said, hugging me briefly, more like brushing shoulders than anything else. "I'm sorry about Uncle Robert." "Thanks," I said. "It's been a long time. How are you?" "Busy, kids, you know." She glanced back at the group. "Jason mentioned you're living in New York now? That must be interesting." "It is," I said, trying to sound neutral. "I've been working hard as an artist. I actually have a gallery show next month that—" "Oh, that's nice," Diane interrupted, her voice light but her eyes cold. "Must be fun to follow your dreams while Jason's been here handling everything." She didn't even pretend to hide the judgment in her tone. "Excuse me," she said abruptly. "I need to check on my husband." She was gone before I could respond. I stood there, again alone, again unwelcome. I wandered to the edge of the room, near the windows, letting my gaze drift over the crowd. Laughter, small talk, clinking cups, every sound made me feel more invisible. Then I heard his voice again, Jason, loud enough for everyone to hear, deliberately piercing through the din. I still can't believe she had the nerve to show up today. After how she broke Dad's heart? Refused to visit when he was sick? My hands clenched at my sides. I didn't know Dad had been seriously ill. No one had told me. I might have tried harder if I had known, might have fought through the silence, the hurt, the distance. "Well, she's in for a surprise tomorrow," Jason continued, smirking to the board members nearby. "Dad updated his will last year. After she didn't even come home for his birthday. He finally saw her for what she was. One of the board members noticed me standing just behind them and nudged Jason. He turned, exaggerated surprise on his face. "Oh, Allison, didn't see you there."
He didn't sound remotely sincere.
"We were just discussing tomorrow's meeting with the lawyer. You are planning to attend, aren't you?" "I'll be there," I said quietly, my voice tight. "Excellent,"
He said, his smile like ice. "It should be enlightening."
Uncle Warren chimed in, not even looking at me. "I don't know why you're bothering." Robert made his feelings quite clear while he was alive, did he? I asked, heat rising in my chest. What exactly did he say? "That's between him and the family members who actually stayed in touch," Warren said coolly. "Maybe if you picked up the phone once in a while, you'd know." "I tried," I said, the words coming too fast, too loud. "It's not as simple as you're making it sound." "Never's with you," Jason cut in. "Always an excuse. Always someone else's fault. Dad got tired of it, Allison. He got tired of waiting for you to grow up." The nearby conversations had gone quiet again. Everyone was watching us. "You have no idea what my relationship with Dad was like," I said. my voice shaking now. You have no right. I have every right, Jason snapped. I was there every day while you were off playing artist. In New York, I was helping him build Hayes Properties. I was the real child. That last jab, the deliberate slip through a few chuckles. My humiliation was complete. Face it, Jason said, his voice low and triumphant. You're just here. For the money. Everyone here knows it. You know it. Tomorrow we make it official. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My throat closed with unshed tears. Every instinct in me screamed to run, to leave, to disappear back into the city that had embraced me when my own family had turned its back. But walking out now would confirm everything they thought they knew. So I stood tall. I guess we'll all find out tomorrow, won't we? I said, before walking away. Megan found me outside in the church garden. I sat on a bench beneath a tree, weeping silently, my grief raw and bitter. Those people are toxic, she said, sitting beside me and offering me a tissue. Jason has them all completely fooled. Maybe he's right, I whispered. Maybe I should have tried harder with Dad. Maybe I don't deserve anything. Megan turned me toward her, her eyes fierce. That's ridiculous. Your brother is manipulative and cruel. And whatever happens tomorrow, you know your worth. Your father's money doesn't define your value. I nodded, but I didn't believe her. Yet, not completely. Not until the next day, when everything would change. The morning of the will reading arrived, shrouded in the same gloomy, overcast sky that had loomed over the funeral. The city outside my hotel window felt distant, like I was watching it through glass rather than existing within it. I had barely slept, and the coffee I nursed did nothing to calm my stomach. Megan offered to come with me, but I shook my head. This was something I had to face alone. Her hug lingered just a little longer before I left, her eyes filled with a worry she didn't. Voice, call me as soon as it's done. No matter what happens, she insisted. I promised I would, though I suspected I'd be making that call in tears. The law offices of Jenkins. Baxter and Wright occupied the top floor of a sleek, high-rise downtown building. Ironically, owned by my father's company. The irony of entering a building that now, technically, belonged in part to me was not lost on me. I rode the elevator in silence, my reflection in the brushed steel doors a blur of nerves wrapped in black fabric. When I stepped into the reception area, the hush of thick carpeting and soft lighting did little to ease the knot in my chest. The conference room, with its long polished table and panoramic view of the skyline, was already half filled when I arrived. Jason sat at the head of the table, postured like a CEO already anointed, confidently engaging in conversation with Uncle Warren, Aunt Patricia, and 2 board members from Hayes Properties. Their laughter was too loud, their expressions too smug. As I entered, the room fell into a lull of whispers and sidelong glances. Jason looked up, that same mock surprise playing across his face. Allison, you actually came. He gestured to a seat farthest from him at the foot of the table. The symbolism wasn't subtle. I walked the length of the room, each step heavy, with scrutiny, and took my place without comment. I didn't acknowledge their stares. I focused on the smooth grain of the table, the rhythmic thud of my heartbeat in my ears. I just had to survive this, get through the reading, collect whatever tokens scraps my father had left me, and leave. That was the plan. Jason's voice carried across the table again. I was just updating the board on the Madison Avenue project, the one Dad and I worked on during his last few months. It's going to completely transform that district. His words were loud, performative, calculated. He wanted to make it clear that I had no place in this conversation, in this company, in this legacy. I said nothing. My presence was already enough of a provocation. At precisely 10 o'clock, the door opened and Harold Jenkins entered, looking as composed and dignified as ever. He was a tall man with a kind face aged by years of experience and wisdom. He moved with slow purpose, setting his briefcase on the table and removing a slim folder. When he saw me, he offered a genuine smile and gently squeezed my shoulder. Allison, thank you for coming, he said warmly. I'm very sorry about your father. He spoke of you often. The simple kindness nearly cracked the wall I'd built around myself. Harold cleared his throat and addressed the room. Thank you all for being here. As you know, Robert Hayes was not just a client of mine for over 30 years, but a close personal friend. His passing is a loss that touches many corners of this city and industry. There were murmurs of agreement, some more sincere than others. Harold continued, his tone shifting. Robert left very specific instructions for how this reading was to be conducted. While we will be reviewing the written document in full, he also recorded a video message, which he instructed be played before anything else. A ripple of surprise moved around the room. Jason's confident demeanor faltered slightly. A video? He asked, masking his unease with curiosity. He never mentioned anything like that to me. Harold's expression remained neutral. He recorded it privately 3 months ago. It was his wish that this video be shared before any legal discussion takes place. Jason's jaw tightened. Well then, let's get on with it, he said, with exaggerated casualness. I'm sure it's just Dad adding a personal touch. The assistant entered with a laptop and a portable projector, and after a few moments of adjustment, the lights dimmed. Harold checked a list of attendees, confirming that everyone named in the will was present. Then he gave a simple nod. The screen flickered to life, and there he was. My father, alive, composed and heartbreakingly familiar. He sat at his desk in his home office, dressed in the navy suit he reserved for important occasions.
His silver.
Hair was neatly combed, and he looked directly into the camera, as if he could see each of us. A hush fell over the room, so thick it felt like the air had been sucked out. Hello, everyone, he began, his voice steady but full of gravity. If you're watching this, then I'm no longer with you. I've asked Harold to play this message, because there are things that must be said, truths that I didn't see until it was nearly too late. I felt something stir in me, something fragile and aching and hopeful. This is a message about truth, he continued. About family, about betrayal, and about forgiveness. And about second chances. Allison. He paused, his eyes seeming to search the screen. If you're here, and I hope with all my heart that you are, I need to say something I should have said in person. He took a breath. I'm sorry. The room reacted as if a bomb had gone off. A few people gasped. Jason shifted in his seat. I'm sorry for the distance between us, Dad continued, for not supporting your dreams. And most of all, for believing lies about you that I should have questioned. The world stopped. I could barely process what I was hearing. You see, he said, his expression darkening. 6 months ago, after a minor heart episode, I began working from home more frequently. One afternoon, I was in Jason's office, searching for some documents, when I found something that changed everything. He held up a folder. Inside a locked drawer were years of unopened mail. Birthday cards, invitations, letters, all from you, Allison. All kept from me. A shocked murmur echoed around the table. My breath caught. Jason had gone completely still. At first I thought it was a misunderstanding, but I hired a private investigator to be sure. What I found. Dad shook his head. Jason had been intercepting your calls, deleting your voicemails. He even posed as me in some messages, discouraging you from coming home. Harold raised a hand as Jason stood. You can sit down, Jason, he said firmly. Your father's instructions were to play this video in its entirety. Jason remained frozen for a beat, then slumped back into his chair, his jaw tight. I also learned, Dad continued, that Jason has been engaging in practices that go against everything Hayes Properties stands for. Cutting corners, falsifying reports, bribing officials. Several board members exchanged alarmed glances. One of them whispered, Jesus Christ. I built this company on integrity, Dad said. On the belief that our name meant something. Jason, you betrayed that. Jason was pale now, lips tight with rage. Allison, Dad said again, his voice softening. I know I failed you. I know we lost time we can never get back. But I need you to know, I see you now. I followed your career, not through Jason's filtered reports, but through your work itself. I've bought your paintings anonymously. I've read the reviews. You've built something incredible from nothing. Just like I once did. I could barely hold back the tears. And so, he said, voice steady again, to the matter of my will. My original draft made Jason the primary inheritor, with a small trust for Allison. That will has been revoked. There was a collective intake of breath. To my son, Jason Hayes, he said, I leave a trust of $500,000 to be distributed over 10 years, contingent upon his full cooperation with the ethics investigation and completion of a business ethics program. Jason stood again, sputtering. This is insane.
He was manipulated. Sit down, Harold said, more sharply this time, to my daughter.
Allison Hayes, Dad said, I leave my personal residence, my personal investment portfolio, and 51% of Hayes properties. The room exploded into chaos. Aunt Patricia gasped audibly. Uncle Warren stood up, shouting something indiscernible. Jason looked like he'd been struck. Harold simply waited calmly for the noise to die down. Allison's ethics, creativity, and dedication make her the best person to lead this company. Into the future, Dad said. Whether she chooses to be actively involved or serve as board chair while pursuing her art is up to her. The rest of the shares, Dad explained, would be distributed among key board members and management. A foundation in his name would be created to support arts education, directed by me. Jason stormed out, knocking over a chair. Others followed in a mix of shock, murmuring among themselves. Only Harold remained behind as I sat motionless. No, you. Knew? I whispered. Harold nodded slowly. Your father was heartbroken by what he discovered, but he was proud of you. So proud. I pressed my hand to my mouth as tears fell freely. All the years I thought he was ashamed of me. He had been collecting my work, following my career, planning to reconcile. I hadn't been rejected. I had been robbed, but not anymore. As the rest of the legal proceedings continued, I sat taller, stronger. The weight of grief had not lifted, but it was no longer a burden of rejection. It was something else now, something closer to a legacy, a second chance. A voice from beyond the grave, telling me I was worthy all along, and I intended to honor it. The days following the will reading unfolded like a surreal dream, equal parts, chaos, grief, and strange empowerment. I wasn't sure what I expected after the video ended and Jason stormed out, but what I didn't expect was the silence that followed. No scathing emails, no dramatic showdown. No demand to meet or apologize or make amends. Just ... silence. Jason vanished like a ghost, retreating from the public eye as quickly as his inheritance had shrunk. Harold told me a week later that Jason had quietly moved out of Dad's house, now legally my house, and taken what he described as an extended international vacation. I didn't ask where. I didn't want to know. In truth, I didn't have the space to focus on Jason. There was too much else demanding my attention. The first and most urgent question, would I stay in New York and attempt to run the company from afar? Or would I move back to Boston and step fully into the center of the storm? I spent several sleepless nights grappling with it. My art studio was in New York. My life, however fragmented and solitary, was there. But Hayes Properties wasn't a passive investment. It was an empire. My father's life's work. And now it was partially mine. Harold helped me sort through the decision with the steady hand of someone who guided grieving families through decades of transitions. You don't have to decide right away, he said one evening as we sat in my temporary office. But the board will be looking to you for direction. Even if you appoint someone to run day-to-day operations, they'll want to know your vision. Vision. I'd spent my entire adult life pouring vision onto canvas, but applying it to a real estate firm. That felt absurd. And yet I couldn't deny a growing flame in my chest. Not pride, exactly, and certainly not revenge, but something rooted in the need to honor what my father had finally seen in me. I hadn't chased this responsibility. It had been placed in my hands alongside his faith. Ignoring it would feel like a second betrayal. So I made my choice. I would move back to Boston temporarily, I told myself. Just long enough to stabilize things, put the right people in place, learn enough to make educated decisions, and honor my father's legacy. I found a charming brownstone apartment downtown, not far from the company's headquarters, but far enough from my childhood home to avoid waking old ghosts too often. I delayed moving into the house. It was too full of memories, and Jason's energy still clung to it like dust on forgotten shelves. My first official day as majority shareholder and I'm board chair at Hayes Properties began with rain. The kind of soft, persistent drizzle that clung to windows like breath. I stood in front of the building my father had helped design and felt the strange weight of being part of something I'd always been told I didn't belong to. The receptionist gave me a hesitant smile as I walked in. A few staff members offered polite nods, but most looked away. I could feel the tension simmering just below the surface. To them, I was the prodigal daughter with a paintbrush, suddenly sitting at the helm of a billion-dollar development firm. I couldn't blame them for their doubt. My first order of business was to hold an all-staff meeting. I needed to look them in the eye, to be seen, to own this role, even if I didn't yet feel like I deserved it. I know what many of you are thinking. I began, standing in front of a room of wary faces. You don't know me. And maybe you've heard things about me that made you question why I'm here. But let me tell you what I do know. I looked around the room, holding their gaze. I know integrity. I know hard work. I know what it's like to build something from nothing and watch people scoff because it doesn't look like what they expected. And I know that if my father, who built this company brick by brick, trusted me with it, then I owe it to him and to you to learn everything I can. I'm not pretending to be a real estate expert, but I do know the values this company was founded on, and I intend to uphold them. There was a long silence. Then, slowly, a few employees began to nod. It wasn't applause or approval, but it was a start. I threw myself into the work. I met with department heads, pored over quarterly reports, took long meetings with city planning officials, and sat with Harold nearly every evening, asking questions and taking furious notes like a student cramming for final exams. I visited construction sites, toured buildings, and began forming relationships with managers and architects. Some employees quit within weeks. Long-time Jason loyalists who'd been promised promotions or favors that would now go unfulfilled. Others stayed, cautiously optimistic, watching me with careful eyes. The board was a mixed bag. A few were genuinely supportive, seeing the wisdom in my father's choice. Others were indifferent, waiting to see whether I would succeed or crash and burn. And then there were the quiet saboteursmen and women who had profited handsomely under Jason's less than ethical leadership and now feared their secrets would unravel under mine. So I ordered a full audit. Every project, every invoice, every permit and inspection from the last 5 years would be reviewed by an independent firm. It caused a stir. Rumors flew. But I didn't care. If I was going to lead Hayes Properties, I had to root out the rot. And it was deeper than I imagined. The Madison Avenue project, the very one Jason had bragged about at the funeral, was riddled with shortcuts. Cheap materials substituted for approved ones. Safety protocols ignored to speed up construction. Bribes paid to push approvals through without scrutiny. It was everything my father had feared and more. We halted construction. It was a public relations nightmare. Headlines questioned the company's integrity. Investors grew jittery. But I stood firm. We brought in new engineers, redesigned flawed elements, and recertified every system. We lost time, we lost money. But we built something solid, something safe. At the ribbon-cutting ceremony, 6 months after my father's death, I stood beneath a crisp fall sky and gave a short speech. This building isn't just a structure, I told the crowd. It's a promise that Hayes Properties will never sacrifice integrity for profit. My father believed in doing things the right way, even when it was hard. Today we keep that promise. That night, I went home and finally opened the door to my childhood house. I walked the hallways in silence, touching the walls I once leaned against as a teenager. The furniture was still as I remembered it, though Jason had clearly rearranged a few things. In the study, I found the chair my father used to sit in, still bearing the slight indent from years of use. I stood for a long time, just looking. Then I saw it, a panel in the bookcase I hadn't thought about since I was a child. We used to play hide and seek, and once I found a secret compartment behind the books. I knelt, hands trembling, and pressed. The panel. It opened. Inside was a small wooden box. I lifted it carefully and opened it to reveal a trove of carefully preserved memories. Photographs of me at my first gallery opening. A newspaper clipping of a glowing review. A flyer from my senior art show. And at the very bottom a journal. It was leather-bound, worn at the edges. I opened it and saw my father's handwriting. The entries dated back years. At first, they were about business. Notes, frustrations, meetings, then came mentions of me. Saw Allison's painting online today. Read one entry. She's better than I expected, not just good moving. I don't understand her world, but maybe I should try. A few pages later, Jason said she hasn't returned his calls. I wonder if she's truly cut ties or if something else is going on. It hurts not knowing. I read for hours, turning page after page as the tone shifted. Doubt began to creep in. Then came the entry from just months before he died. The investigator confirmed it. Jason's been keeping her away from me for years. I feel like a fool. How many birthdays did I miss? How many milestones? I need to make this right. I'm going to New York. I'll tell her everything myself. I sobbed, the pain of knowing how close we'd come to reconciliation. Only to lose him to a final cruel twist of fate was almost unbearable. But there was something else in those pages to redemption. My father hadn't died estranged from me. He had found his way back to the truth, and now it was mine to carry forward. The months that followed were the most transformative of my life, not because they were smooth or easy, but because they tested every inch of who I was. I had stepped into a world that had never been built for someone like me. The boardroom still felt like foreign soil, with its polished surfaces and measured tones. Its acronyms and numbers that seemed to speak a language different from the one. I used to create my art, but I learned every day I learned, and more than that. I built with the company stabilizing under new leadership and the Madison Avenue project. Finally complete and lauded as a triumph of transparency and quality. I turned my attention to something far more personal, the creation of the Robert Hayes Foundation for Arts Education. It was a seed my father had planted in his final will, a legacy not of buildings but of beauty, of creativity, of access, and of love. We launched the foundation with a modest team and a clear mission to bring arts education and funding to underserved public schools throughout Boston. I'd seen firsthand the way creativity had saved me. When my family had cast me out, when Jason had poisoned my relationship with our father, when I had felt like nothing more than a failure in their eyes, it was art that gave me something solid to hold on to. It seemed only right that I would now turn around and offer that same lifeline to others. The first grant cycle opened with applications from 17 schools. We awarded 5. I made sure to visit each one personally. I walked the hallways with principals who told me stories of students whose only sense of pride came from what they could draw. I sat in makeshift classrooms where teachers scraped together supplies from their own wallets. And in one particularly moving visit, I stood next to a young girl who had painted a mural in the school cafeteria, a sea of swirling blues and purples, filled with fish that carried messages like dream and don't give up across their scales. When she told me her name was Allison, something in my chest cracked open. Back at Hayes Properties, I had begun to gain real traction. With several successful restructuring projects under my belt, board confidence grew. I appointed a new ethics officer. We implemented a whistleblower policy. We diversified our vendors and signed off on the company's first ever community engagement plan, ensuring residents had a say in local developments. Yet for all the forward momentum, one piece remained stubbornly unresolved. My relationship, or lack thereof, with Jason. It had been nearly a year since the funeral. I hadn't heard a single word from him, no apology, no explanation, not even an angry email. According to Harold and some quiet whispers among family, Jason had spent the first few months abroad, Europe, mostly finding himself, as some kindly phrased it. I didn't need to be told that he was really hiding from me, from the press, from himself. But family has a way of circling back. It started with a phone call from Diane. I just thought you should know, she said, her voice tentative. Jason's back in Boston. I swallowed hard. How long? A few weeks. He's been staying with Aunt Patricia. He hasn't reached out to anyone directly. But I ran into him at a fundraiser.
And? I asked, already bracing for the worst. He looks different, older, angrier, maybe.
But tired too, double quotes, tired, I didn't know how to respond to that. What did one say about a brother who tried? To erase you from your own family. Who committed fraud and sabotaged your life for years, but who was still, at the end of the day, your mother's son and your childhood partner in every summer adventure. I spent the next few days unable to focus. Everything felt muted, colors dulled, food tasted like ash. My brush sat unused on my studio table. I couldn't stop thinking about that little boy on the Cape, the one who had held my hand when I was afraid of the ocean, the one who used to sneak me extra marshmallows when Mom said. I'd had enough, so when I opened my email one morning and saw a message titled Request from Jason Hayes, I stared at it for 10 full minutes before clicking. Allison, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't even expect a response. But I'm asking if you'd meet me. Just once. I won't try to explain what can't be explained. I just want to say something I should have said a long time ago. Let me know if you're willing. I'll be at the old marina on Saturday at noon. If you don't come, I'll understand. Jason and I reread the message 4 times. I could feel Megan's eyes on me from across the shared studio we'd rented for our respective projects. Is that who I think it is? She asked quietly. I nodded. You don't have to go, you know. You owe him nothing. I know. But I also knew that there are some moments you can't get back if you don't take them. Saturday arrived cold and sharp with spring wind. I wore a simple coat and kept my hair pulled back. I didn't want to look polished or powerful. I didn't want this to be a business meeting or a public performance. I just wanted it to be honest. The marina was mostly empty when I arrived. The boats bobbing lazily in the harbor, their sails tied down like sleeping birds. Jason stood at the end of the dock, hands in his coat pockets, hair tousled, face drawn. He turned when he heard my footsteps. Allison. I stopped a few feet away. Jason. A long silence stretched between us. He looked thinner, somehow smaller. Not in stature, but in spirit. Like someone who had carried too much shame for too long and had nowhere left to put it. Thanks for coming.
He said, I wasn't sure I would. I wasn't sure you should.
We both gave the faintest of sad smiles at the same time. A flicker of old rhythm between us. And then it was gone. I don't really know how to do this, he said finally. I thought I could write something, but it felt cowardly. So here I am. I nodded once. Say what you need to say. I was angry, he said, voice low. At Dad, at you, at the world, I guess. I told myself you didn't care because it was easier than admitting I was the one driving you away. I lied to him, I lied to everyone, but mostly I lied to myself. I said nothing. I didn't want to interrupt. I wanted to know if he had the courage to really face it. The Dad loved. You, Jason continued, his voice cracking. He never stopped. I knew that. That's why I kept the letters. That's why I erased your messages. Because deep down I was afraid he'd love you more. That he'd see something in you that he didn't in me. My breath caught. I wanted Hayes Properties to be mine so badly, he said, turning toward the water. I didn't even stop to think about what I was becoming. And now I've lost everything. Not everything, I said softly. You're still here, and maybe that's something. He turned to me, tears brimming. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I didn't say I forgive you. He flinched, but then nodded. But I don't hate you either, I added. I hated what you did. I hated what it cost us. But I don't hate you. I miss Dad, he whispered. So do I. We stood in silence together, looking out at the water. We built something good, he said after a while. The foundation, the company. We made it better. Thanks, I said, the words catching in my throat. But I didn't do it alone. Dad gave me the chance, Harold helped. The board believed eventually. Still, he said, you earned it. Another silence. This one softer. Not a wall, but a breath. I'm heading back to Europe, Jason said. Don't worry, I'm not trying to weasel back into anything. I've been working with a nonprofit in Lisbon. They help build schools in low-income areas. It's not real estate, but it's something that sounds good, I said, honestly surprised. Take care of the company, he said. Make it something Dad would be proud of. Something we'd both be proud of. I will, he nodded again. Then turned and walked slowly down the dock. Disappearing into the wind, I stood there for a long time after he left, watching the water. Lapped gently against the wooden posts, thinking of all that had been lost, and all that might still be found. Time has a way of reshaping wounds into wisdom of stretching pain until it thins and transforms into something more manageable, even if never fully forgotten. It had been over a year since that day at the marina when Jason and I finally spoke. And nearly 2 since I'd first sat alone at my father's funeral. A black sheep forced to confront a legacy she never expected to inherit. Hayes Properties was now thriving, not just in the financial sense, though the numbers were solid and our projects expanding, but in the deeper, quieter sense of having reclaimed its soul. We were building responsibly, with input from the communities we served. We held ourselves to a standard higher than profit. And somewhere along the way, I had stopped feeling like an imposter in the boardroom. My dual life, artist and executive, had become less a contradiction, and more a composite. I painted early in the mornings or on weekends, my studio now relocated to the sunroom of my father's former home, where the light spilled in from every angle. It was strange to live here now, among the ghosts of my childhood, but also healing. The rooms no longer felt haunted, just filled with echoes. My father's study remained untouched, except for the additions I'd made. The framed photo of us fishing, the journal he'd kept so meticulously now sealed in a shadow box on the shelf, and a small plaque beneath it that simply read, "Forgiveness is a kind of seeing." That quote had been something he'd written in one of his final entries. I found myself returning to it again and again. The Robert Hayes Foundation had also grown. We now supported programs in 15 schools, had awarded scholarships to over 40 students, and had opened an after-school art center in Dorchester. It was filled with color and noise and kids who reminded me so much of myself, quiet and weird and brimming with creativity. They didn't yet know how to express. One of the most rewarding experiences of my life came that fall, when we launched the Foundation's largest project yet, a Citywide Youth Arts Competition. We invited submissions from public school students aged 10 to 18, asking them to reflect on the theme, home and legacy. The winners would be displayed in a rotating gallery throughout City Hall and major Boston transit hubs. We received over 2,000 entries. I spent days reviewing them with the Foundation team, stunned by the raw emotion and originality in the work. One piece in particular, a mixed media collage from a 14-year-old named Jaden, moved me to tears. It showed a house made of broken glass, stitched together by thread, hovering above a city skyline. A figure stood outside it, reaching toward the door. The caption read, "Sometimes you have to rebuild the place you were supposed to belong to." I found myself staring at that sentence for hours, because, in a way, it summed up everything I had done since returning home that winter. I decided to host a small event at the house, just close friends, board members, and Foundation staff. It wasn't a grand gala or PR stunt, just a quiet celebration of progress, of healing, of possibility. As I stood in the living room, glass of wine in hand, surrounded by laughter and the soft music of a string quartet we'd hired, I couldn't help but feel the contrast to the isolation I had felt not so long ago. This room had once echoed with my absence. Now it pulsed with life. Harold approached me with a familiar smile, his gray suit impeccable as always. "You've done something extraordinary here," he said, raising his glass slightly. "Thank you," I replied, though I still feel like I'm winging it half the time. "Well," he said with a wink, "so did your father. He just pretended otherwise with great flair." We laughed. Then Harold reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small velvet pouch. "I've been holding on to this," he said, offering it to me. "Your father gave it to me the day he finalized his revised will. He asked me to give it to you when the time felt right." With trembling fingers, I opened the pouch. Inside was a delicate gold bracelet, simple but elegant. A small charm hung from it, a tiny artist's palette. I recognized it instantly. It had belonged to my mother. She'd worn it every day until the day she died. I thought it was lost. I whispered, "Your father found it in one of your old boxes. Said it reminded him of your fire." I slipped the bracelet on, and something inside me clicked into place. Some tiny piece of identity that had always felt floating finally grounded. "Thank you, Harold," I said, hugging him, "for everything." That night, as the guests trickled out and I stood alone in the house again, I wandered into the study and sat in my father's chair. For a moment, I allowed myself to close my eyes and imagine him beside me, older, softer, still wise. I wondered what he would say now, seeing everything that had come to pass. Would he be surprised? Proud? Regretful? I hoped it was all three. A few days later, I received a letter. Not an email, not a text, a real letter. The envelope bore a Portuguese stamp. I recognized the handwriting immediately. "Allison, I'm writing because I finally feel like I have something to say that isn't soaked in guilt or desperation. Life here is slower. It's giving me space to think clearly. I'm working with a team that builds low-cost housing for families who've lost everything. It's the first time I felt useful in a long time. I don't want to pretend we're okay. I know we're not. And maybe we never will be, but I do think about you. I think about Dad. I think about the choices I made. I hope someday we'll sit down again, not as enemies. Maybe not even as siblings. Just as two people who came from the same place and are trying to find their way forward. I'm proud of what you've done. Even if I didn't help build it, I can at least say I didn't stop it." Jason and I read the letter 3 times. Then I placed it in the drawer beside Dad's journal. No response. Not yet, but the door was cracked. Spring brought more growth, more exhibitions, more projects. The company was now pursuing green building initiatives, and I'd personally funded an Artist in Residence program that would partner creatives with community redevelopment sites. Our projects weren't just construction, they were stories, and my story was still unfolding. On the 2nd anniversary of my father's passing, I returned to the cemetery with another bouquet of wildflowers. This time I didn't cry. I simply sat with him. "I kept my promise," I said softly. "The company's thriving, the foundation's expanded, and I still paint. I even sold out my last solo show." The wind rustled the leaves above, and I imagined his voice saying, "I knew you would. I miss you," I added, "but I carry you with me every day." As I stood to leave, I placed a small framed photo at the base of the headstone, a snapshot from the ribbon cutting of a new school gym the company had helped build, standing next to Jaden, the young artist whose work had moved me so deeply. He now led his school's arts club. I had taken him under the foundation's wing, quietly mentoring him in both painting and confidence. "I think you'd like him," I said, brushing my hand across the top of the stone. The sun broke through the clouds, casting a warm light over the grass. I turned and walked away, not with the heavy step of mourning, but with the steady pace of someone who had found peace, because that's what this journey had ultimately been about. Not wealth, not revenge, not even validation, but peace. Peace with who I was, peace with who my father had been, and slowly, perhaps even peace with who my brother might still become. Life continued, as it always does, with deadlines and gallery openings and board meetings and late-night cups of tea. Some days I felt exhausted, other days I felt invincible. But every day I felt whole. And that, more than anything, was the true inheritance my father had left me. Not just a company, not just a foundation, but the courage to be fully, unapologetically myself, and the knowledge that sometimes, even after years of silence and pain, love finds a way to speak. And when it does, it changes everything.